Today we're going to talk about King Lear, Shakespeare's most moving, most emotionally powerful drama. This frightens me. I'm glad that Dr. Shin told me only now, because it's true that I tend to become emotional about the things I talk about. Well, King Lear, I'm afraid of. It is so, in class, I don't let myself read, I let others read. It's so powerful. It's frightening how powerful it is. I'm not so sure, though. It's not without its flaws. In my opinion, by the way, the greatest of Shakespeare's plays is Antony and Cleopatra. King Lear, for all its emotional, for its pathos, for its poignancy, Poign, for its deeply moving words and scenes, has some problems, and I'll try to bring that out in my opinion. Okay. Many Koreans know the story, I have found, so that's interesting, and I'll try to take you into the play a little bit. Generally, I have noticed that translations of Shakespeare are, I suspect, miserable failures, into Korean especially, because the distance between our two languages is so vast. Anyway, I'm going to tell a little story. A student of mine came to me yesterday. I teach her Latin, and I never did talk about Latin the way I wanted to in my autobiographical sketches. But for me, I have become, thanks to Koreans, a Latin teacher. I'm not there yet, but I have some students through whom I will take through my very excellent textbook, and that's my topic here. Anyway, the author of my textbook is Frederick M. Wheelock. It's a famous college Latin textbook. And my charming student brought a book, a Korean book, to me yesterday, my Latin student. I said, oh, she said, look at this book. Latin, but Korean. All the writing that wasn't Latin was Korean on the cover. And there was the author's name, and she, knowing that I can at least read some Korean, said, read it. So I can't. I wish I were a better mimic, but I can't do it. Anyway, Frederick M. Wheelock. It's my Latin textbook in Korean. But if you take a name like Frederick, imagine the possibilities here. F-R, R, Wheelock. How are you going to do that? Well, I read it painfully in Korean, and I didn't get it. And then she put the other book side by side. Oh, wow, what laughter. What laughter. Because these are sounds that are almost impossible in your language, just on the level of sounds. So, to King Lear. The gaps between our languages and cultures are so huge. King Lear. 1605 is the date for King Lear. Here we go. This is based on a story that exists in the Chronicles of England. If accurate at all, King Lear lived maybe in the 8th century. Now, one thing about King Lear that I think is very remarkable, for the most part, Shakespeare intentionally makes him pre-Christian. Now, Shakespeare and religion is a very interesting topic. For my view, the most religious play of Shakespeare is Macbeth. And if we haven't done Macbeth yet, we certainly must, because Macbeth...
We did.
Oh, we did. Okay. Thank you. So that's kind of interesting. Okay. King Lear is, we imagine, about a man of about 80. the actor who plays Lear should be tall, because Lear should dominate any room that he's in, dominate the people around him. Lear has 3 daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. Goneril and Regan are both married. Goneril to the Earl of Albany, Regan to the Duke of Cornwall. Cordelia the third, his favorite, has 2 suitors who want to marry her. The King of France. You have to be aware, France was not a very big place in those days. It was the Ile-de-France around Paris, but still considerable. And the Duke of Burgundy, a much better catch money-wise, and both of them appeared to, I don't know, they both want to marry Cordelia. At the beginning of the action, at the very beginning, things happen fast in this play, faster than in most others from the start. Lear has decided that he wants to retire from the throne, and while still alive, he wants to divide his kingdom into 3 among his daughters. And he will give the largest portion of land to that daughter who protests her love most passionately, that is, who says she loves him. Now, this, of course, is real nonsense. This is stupid. And his advisors, especially the greatest of them, Kent, who is a great man, tried to dissuade him from taking this foolish step. But they can't tell him why it's so foolish directly. For them, it's politically foolish. But imagine the person who tells me she loves me most passionately will be my favorite. Well, this is too stupid. Just plain stupid. And okay, the story is real, but that exceeds credulity. Okay. So, Regan gives her speech, I love you as much as the waters rush to the stars in the sky, blah, 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 blah. Goneril gives her speech, same, but even more. Now it's Cordelia's turn, and Cordelia has said aside a couple of times, oh my God, I can't do this. And finally, Cordelia, your turn. Nothing, my lord. Nothing will give you nothing of land. Maybe you want to change that. Nothing, my lord. What? He explodes, immoderate, irascible, egotistic man that he is. And these qualities have to be established early in the play, have established well. He's an obnoxious man. At the beginning of the play, he's an obnoxious man. Sometime it would be nice to talk about how likable the heroes in literature are. If for a hero to be likable, that's a dangerous thing. He shouldn't be likable. In thinking about tragedy, the tragic hero is a flawed human being, and he should be a flawed human being, not entirely likable. Mention of Macbeth before is interesting because, in his case, Shakespeare has to make him likable because he's doing monstrous things. But in the others, okay, Lear is a very flawed man. And he rants and raves about ingratitude. He will rant and rave about ingratitude for 3 acts. That's a little hard to take. And for us to feel sympathy for him, no, sorry. He's mistreated, he suffers, but what initiated this was his own folly, his own absurdity. That doesn't mean he deserves what happens to him, but it does mean that we can sympathize not very much with his ranting and raving. Okay, so you ingrate. He calls Burgundy and France into the room. Do you guys still want her portionless, meaning without any land? The King of France says, gee, I really like her, but no. Excuse me, Burgundy says, gee, I really like her, but no. Bye. Bye, Burgundy. France, you can have her. France says, I'll take her. Because France has heard what happened, and France admires her. This should be enough to make us like and admire France much more than we like and admire LEAR. Good thought. A good sense of justice, a good sense of values, a good judge of character is this King of France. So take her and go. So now the real action begins. LEAR has signed a contract with his two daughters, Goneril and Regan, that he will divide his time between the two of them, staying 1 month with one of them, with his retinue. His retinue consists of 100 knights. So he's traveling around with his knights, and he wants to have a good old time, drink and laugh and reminisce, I suppose, with his buddies, sycophants all, I'm sure, SYCO, sycophants. And what he imagines, I don't know, but a life of ease and pleasure and enjoyment as he approaches death. Okay, well, things do not look very promising. Goneril and Regan are left on the stage, and they say that he did ever but slenderly know himself. I think an important line in LEAR, if not in literature. He did ever but slenderly know himself. The man, after all, he's a man who is, quote, every inch a king, as we hear later. Well, but kings have limitations, of course. It's almost impossible for a king not to be an egomaniac. It's almost impossible for a king not to be consumed with vanity, satisfy every whim, when all the people around him are sycophants, not only kings but people in power. If people in power can be big enough to tolerate critics who really criticize them, who tell them they are being asses when they are being asses, this is a good measure of a person in power. But most people in power don't want to hear that, I'm pretty sure. So people in power are surrounded by flatterers, of course, who tell them that they are so witty and so intelligent and so astute and so perspicacious, insightful. Okay, LEAR. I think, we now meet a fairly important character. Oh, back up. There are two plots, so here we go. But I'm not too far ahead. In a second plot, sorry. I will now talk about Act 1, Scene 1. But it doesn't matter, because the two plots run, how shall we say, concomitantly, hand in hand, kind of, work off of each other. In Act 1, Scene 1, sorry, haven't done it for a while, we meet Gloucester, the Duke of Gloucester, Gloucester. The Duke of Gloucester is talking with Kent. Kent, whom I've already told you, is one of the best people, just persons, in Shakespeare. The best male in Shakespeare he very well might be. Most admirable human being, intelligent, witty, devoted, brave, courageous. What a man. If there are such men, wow, we're in less trouble than one would think. Okay, Kent is talking with Gloucester, and talking about Gloucester's bastard son, Edmund. Edmund is a well-built, well-made, handsome young man, but Edmund has endured jokes about his being a bastard all his life. and now he has a military career, I think. And Gloucester is witty about the nights that he spent making Edmund were much more fun, he says, than the nights that he spent making Edgar, his legitimate son. Edgar is arguably the hero of the play. He is. The play is about Lear, is true, but Edgar is the hero in the more popular sense of the word, the good guy. Even Edgar is not as great as Kent, though. But anyway, so here's Gloucester telling jokes in the presence of his illegitimate son to Kent. I suppose trying to impress Kent with his wit. His manner is reprehensible. His manner is repulsive, is so insensitive, so smug, complacent, self-satisfied, so cute, so frivolous, especially right there in front of his son. It's important. Gloucester is as big a fool, almost, as Lear, but the stakes are not as big. And that's important. Again, there's this double plot. There's the Gloucester plot, and, of course, the Lear plot. So Kent is respectful and talks with, of course, Kent is the ultimate gentleman, real gentleman, man's man. A measure of Kent, by the way. In this play, a person's attitude toward Cordelia will tell us who that person is. Cordelia, whose name comes from the Latin cor cordis, meaning heart. All of Shakespeare's plays ultimately celebrate heart over head. Insofar as this is true, Shakespeare is a romantic. But there it is. Heart over head. The goodness of the heart is much more important and a much better guide in life than anything the head can do. And most human beings will admit this to be true. Though Lord knows the heart can get us in trouble too. Anyway, Kent, devoted follower of Cordelia. Whew, God, I'm in Act 1 and already I'm... Okay, so jokes, and then the stage is empty and we get Edmund. Edmund is a bad guy. He's not the bad guy, and frankly we feel more sympathy with him than we do with Iago, for example, because we've just seen his father, Edmund's father, in action. And that was humiliating. His making jokes to this other man at his expense, his own father, being cutely disparaging about his son. Okay. Edmund says, I may be a bastard, but I'm going to get somewhere in this world. He has a plan. He's going to write a letter, sign that letter Edgar, and the letter is going to imply that the letter is going to be, Dear Edmund, let's kill Dad and take his land now. Let's not wait until the old fool dies. Then, details here, okay, Edgar comes in and we meet Edgar. Excellent young man. Again, a real hero. But for my purposes, Kent is greater. Anyway, Edgar suspects nothing. To me, it's interesting that I think Shakespeare kind of focuses on this kind of thing, as we all should. How inattentive we are, how surprised we always are by extreme evil. Is that our fault? No, it's not our fault. If we went around suspecting evil, being totally... we're guided by trust in our interaction every day. We can't expect that our friend wants to kill us. But it is in the nature of life that we are fooled often by this trust, sometimes terribly. And this is in every one of Shakespeare's tragedies. Especially, I would say, Othello, Macbeth and King Lear. Okay. Edgar, then Edmund tells Edgar that father wants to do some terrible thing. I don't remember what, it doesn't matter. And for some reason he says, quick, let's pretend that we are fighting, that we're having a terrible fight. Edgar goes along with it. I don't remember the reason. It doesn't matter, though. And a lot of noise is made. In rushes Gloucester, father, Edgar, seen running away. Meanwhile, Edmund has secretly even wounded himself, cut himself. What happened? I don't want to tell you, Dad, says Edmund, the bad guy. Tell me, tell me. Well, my brother tried to persuade me to kill you, and I said, no, I won't do it. And in the ensuing struggle, look, he even slashed my arm. Oh my God, that ingrate. Another old fool. It's true, we can't entirely blame Gloucester for believing Edmund, though he believes too quickly and on too little evidence. Anyway, and look, here's this letter he sent to me. Oh, send out people, try to find him and kill him. Oh, already that fast? Edgar, a great, great son, model son. Gloucester is such a terrible judge, just as Lear was, of the human heart, of human character. Okay, got him. Gotta move along. So, now action is happening fast. In Act 2, I think, Lear, he visits Goneril first. And Goneril is very unhappy because the knights, these 100 knights, make so much noise. They seduce the servants. They make a mess. You're going to have to reduce their number. Lear becomes... Lear rants and raves. Ingrate, you too? Ingrate. I'm out of here, as we say in American. I'm out of here. I'm going to go visit your sister. She'll know how to take care of me. Meanwhile, Goneril sends a message to Sister Regan saying what has happened, and we know that Regan will treat Dad the same way. First of all, when he arrives there, this is going to take a couple of scenes, she will say, it's not my time yet. I'm not ready yet. You go back, apologize to your daughter. Lear, apologize? And make peace with Goneril, and then come to me when it's my time. Meanwhile, as Lear's emotion, hysteria, rises and rises, as it does for the first 2 acts, to feverish pitch, we meet another character who is almost major, and that's Lear's fool. Lear's fool does tell Lear the truth. In the past, he's often been beaten for it, but that's what fools could do. Now, a fool was often regarded as, and apparently sometimes was, insane. The sanity of Lear's fool is a serious question. Now, very important. I guess of all the people devoted to Cordelia, the fool is number 1. They have spent a lot of time together. He worships her, I guess you could say. The fool. Wow. And this fool is constantly telling Lear what a fool he is. Constantly making jokes about how the bigger fool is the king. Lear hears these jokes and just kind of perfunctorily dismisses them. But as the jokes become more and more acerbic, more and more cutting, more and more true, we see that Lear is absorbing them, and it's having its impact. What a fool I was. What a fool. But I don't think he's quite ready to face his folly fully. Alliteration, face his folly fully. FFF. No, he's not. I'm not sure he is even at the end. And that's always interesting. Whether our tragic hero in Shakespeare is truly willing to regard himself as he really is? I would say the answer is no. And to my view, not that Shakespeare's opinion need be final, but to my view, if these men, from their experience, can't really fully face who they are and what they are, then no one can. And I take that to be true. We are so protected by our vanity. We are so protected by our desire to think well of ourselves. No wonder contrition is a miracle when it happens. Contrition, that is true guilt, which is given by grace in Protestantism and even in Catholicism. Contrition is a miracle. And one could honestly say it doesn't happen. And I suspect it doesn't happen. If we're ever contrite, it's for a split second, but immediately our vanity will rescue us from thinking ill of ourselves. This is basic Protestant thinking. This is Luther, I would say. Okay. So, back to our plot here. Things are going fast. Now, somehow, Lear and his followers have... Lear went to see Regan, but Regan and Cornwall, her husband, are at Gloucester's castle. Now, everyone's going to be at Gloucester's castle for the next... until Act 5, late 4. And that's kind of important, because we have the Gloucester plot in which Edmund now has been elevated to the level of a hero by Dad. Edgar is on the run, hiding outside in the rough weather, in the stormy, terrible weather, disguised as a beggar, disguised as the lowest of beggars. And Lear comes, demands protection and support from Regan, and is told by Regan, sorry, as I said. So Lear now starts to go a little crazy. Let's see now. And Lear says, I'm out of here too, and wanders out into the rough weather. Now the storm in this play, Shakespeare's storms. Shakespeare needs storms in every one of his plays just about. The storm in Julius Caesar is the most famous. It was historical. And the storms in the other plays, Macbeth, The Tempest, after all, King Lear, there are others, Antony, no, I don't know. Anyway, I'll continue. He needs that storm. So the inclement weather is terrible. And this old king, 80 years old, every inch a king, is out there, and who's with him? His fool, Kent. I forgot to tell you, not too important, but when Kent advised his king not to do this foolish thing, divide the land, Kent was very outspoken, great man that he is. And Lear, starting to show his folly, showing his folly even more, banishes Kent. Banish Kent. So the two best human beings are on the run. And more will follow. Cordelia, more or less banished. Kent, banished. He's given 10 days to get out of the country, or he will be killed. Kent determines to stick around in disguise to help. What a guy. Okay, so Kent is sticking around, and he does help. He becomes a servant of Lear. His disguise is that good. By the way, notice what a huge role disguise plays in this play, more than any other I can think of. I hadn't thought of that. Because Kent is in disguise, Edgar is in disguise. Anybody else? Especially those two. I guess those two, but that's huge. As you most of the comedies have disguise. Twelfth Night, As You Like It, especially. We've never talked about a comedy, but that's okay. I love the tragedies more anyway. Okay, so Kent is hanging around. Kent joins Lear out on the moor. A moor is a flat, desolate area, England and Scotland especially, other places no doubt too, but it's the wind, when there's a wind, just howls straight across that plain, terribly. Desolate, depressing just to think about a moor. And there are some famous ones in England and Scotland. Okay, and Lear is out there on an extremely stormy night. He wanders into a hut that's out there. He and the fool. In the hut already is Edgar. And Edgar disguised as a beggar, the lowest of beggars. His clothes disgusting. And Edgar is an expert at mimicking other English dialects, various dialects. And that's one of the reasons why I wish Shakespeare hadn't done that. There are times, certainly, when Shakespeare shows off. When he wants to show his knowledge of shipping or business or war, fighting, whatever, he lets his characters have long speeches that don't accomplish anything except show us that Shakespeare knew a lot about that particular subject. And that is a nuisance in Shakespeare. In this case, he shows off his knowledge of dialect by letting Edgar overdo it. He overdoes it. But that scene is so powerful and poignant. The fool, nearing insanity. Tom, the beggar, that's Edgar, calls himself Tom, insane. And Lear, drifting in and out of insanity. Those three, and Lear says, we three philosophers are going to discuss life and the ingratitude of children and what life is all about. That is very powerful and poignant. Those three, two of them, once again, in and out of insanity. It's hard to tell when they are sane and insane. The level of pain, let's say the level of pain in all three of those characters. But Edgar really never shows the pain. And I don't like that either. But he understands what has happened and all that, and readily forgives his father later. God, so moving. But okay, those three talking. And Lear, a new theme begins to appear, and that is Lear's sense of social justice. It's very powerful in the play. Is it warranted? What does it have to do with the action of the play? I'm not so sure. It makes us like Lear much more. If that's the sole function, I'm not sure that Shakespeare overdoes it. But it is a powerful thing. Lear, let's say generally, Lear develops a conscience. Suddenly, in Act 2, the fool is talking at him, saying things that fool does. Among these things, you have been a fool, Lear. Lear is only half or not listening at all, and suddenly, out of context, I've done her wrong. Just that, a little 4-word line. I've done her wrong. Well, that's one of the most powerful lines in the play, if not in Shakespeare. And it's so powerful because no one's talking about anything like that, but we can see that Lear is realizing more and more what a terrible injustice he did to Cordelia. Now, I'm going to back up because I have a problem with that too. I have a problem with Cordelia. Cordelia is a Christ figure, but this nothing, my lord, I'm not so sure I admire that. I admire her obstinacy, because it is obstinate. Now, Cordelia is famous for, among other things, whenever she's near Lear, she becomes very terse, very taciturn, but that's not quite my word. Terse is okay. That is, few words. When she's away from Lear, she gives some long speeches. When she's with Lear, very short. She's odd. She's her father's favorite. She's awed by him, as we all are to some degree awed by Lear. He is so imposing a figure, every inch a king. But this nothing, my lord, betrays some obstinacy, which I think should have been articulated or defined or justified a little more. I'm sorry, Dad, but to judge us, to judge our hearts by our words, is pretty foolish, isn't it? Or something. So her obstinacy is not entirely admirable, I think. She's setting her will up against Dad in his folly, as well she should, but with a little more patience, a little more, I don't know, love. But okay. Off we're back in that hut. Lear's development of a conscience. His social conscience is the big idea here. And he says again and again, I have been so negligent in these matters. The rich man and the poor man, the gap between the rich and the poor is unacceptable. I have not done enough for the poor. I have not done anything maybe for the poor. I have not done enough to try to improve the justice system. The rich never punished. The poor over-punished. The disparities in justice, in wealth, in suffering, all unacceptable. This theme then of Lear and social justice, one wonders where Shakespeare is, but again, as I have said before, anyone who tries to determine what Shakespeare believed about anything is engaged in a futile pursuit. And if you or I think I have found what Shakespeare thought, we are fools. No, Shakespeare's a dramatist. Must he have felt some of these things? Sure. But he felt through his characters. He put words in the mouths of his characters that he wanted to for dramatic purposes, and so forth. But it's a very daring matter, this social justice theme, and all of this in the king. You can't criticize what a king says, after all. And it doubles up, it's doubly effective because this is the development of Lear's conscience. And as Lear develops a conscience, of course, he becomes more human and more respectable, more lovable, more the tragic hero. And Lear has been called the great tragic hero. It's not true. It's certainly not true, in my opinion. But, okay, moving on. Meanwhile, there's a political theme, because France, because of Cordelia, is re-entering England and bringing an army. He sees that England is now in social chaos, and so he's going to come over, and his daughter is glad because his daughter has heard the terrible things that are happening to Dad. By the way, back in Gloucester's castle, things start to become very powerful now. Until now, nothing. But the power from Act 3 on, the emotional intensity is unequaled in anything in literature. Nothing can come close. So, oh God, I'm going to try not to be so lachrymose, L-A-C-H-R-Y, tearful. But it is powerful. Anyone who tells the story, I defy anyone to tell the story dry-eyed and without emotion. If he does, he hasn't read it. He's read it in Korean. Read it in Korean and you can do that. Read it in Shakespeare's language and oh boy. Okay, so Gloucester tries to help Lear. Gloucester takes a stand and remains loyal to Lear. He's respectful toward Regan and Cornwall, but he tries to help Lear. This infuriates Regan and Cornwall, and so they, with their servants, tie poor Gloucester up. Gloucester is becoming a human being. And Gloucester answers respectfully, but he says, yes, I tried to help the king. He's my king. Cornwall, outraged by this and even kicks Gloucester in one eye, gouging the eye out right there. An old servant, this is one of the great moments. The play is full of great moments, it must be admitted. But there are these moments in Shakespeare when anonymous minor characters become giants. This is one of those moments. An anonymous servant of Cornwall. Cornwall says, "Here, hold him. I want to get the other eye." "Sire, don't do this. I have been your servant for 30 years, so he's an older man. But don't do this. This is terrible to do this to this old man, because Gloucester's old. Lear's old." And this infuriates Cornwall, so Cornwall pulls his sword out. The servant defends himself. The servant stabs and wounds Cornwall, is killed from behind by Regan. But this servant is a hero. And just to show you, if you try to base your view of Shakespeare's political thinking on this play, you might very well think that he believes in a political agenda similar to Lear's social justice theme, and that basically he likes the lower classes much more, or admires them. He thinks they are morally superior to the upper classes. You can argue the opposite point of view from other scenes in other plays, so it's hopeless. But it's great drama. The one servant dies now. But it turns out that Cornwall is badly wounded. Now, new theme. Regan has been seen, Goneril has been seen, and Regan has been seen talking with Edmund. With the disgrace of Gloucester, Cornwall has made Edmund now Duke of Gloucester. Gloucester is blinded and cast out of his own castle out into the terrible storm too. My God, these old men in this terrible stormy night, suffering for their folly, but already beyond their folly, it must be admitted. But acquiring some humanity, you could say, and one could argue this. I kind of believe it, that it requires suffering of this kind, or of some kind, to drive us to any truth at all, any realistic assessment of ourselves at all, and I can well believe it. Anyway, this is what happens in the play. Okay, now Gloucester too is out there. Edgar, his son, finds Gloucester and will guide him to Dover town, Dover Beach, coast of England. That's where France will arrive. But Edgar, of course, in disguise. And we get these very poignant, moving moments as Edgar, with his affected accent, his dialect, guiding his blinded father, who now sees the truth, that how deeply he wronged Edgar, trusted the wrong son, just as Lear trusted the wrong daughters, and deeply wounded and wronged the best of his daughters. The parallelism. Okay. Great lines. Now, among the great lines, as the two of them walk, father and son, though father, a blind, suffering old man, not knowing that this is his great son, Edgar, in Gloucester's mouth is given one of the great lines. But as always, we should beware. Just to give you an idea, on my wall behind Dr. Shin is we'll show it sometime, a poster of Shakespeare. And below a drawing of Shakespeare, would you Okay. Dr. Chin has shown you this poster that stares me in the face every day, which gives me joy, actually. But the line under it, "To thine own self be true," that's one of those Shakespearean cliches. That is, it has been taken up and embraced by the popular public, kind of like "to be or not to be," and maybe there are others. It's spoken in Hamlet by Polonius, and Polonius is kind of a fool. He is a fool. And so Shakespeare puts this relatively, first of all, is very obscure, "To thine own self be true." Excuse me, how does one go about doing that? That in itself is nonsense, in my opinion. Which self? To which self shall I be true? That's enough said there. Now, one of the great lines in a play full of great lines, maybe it has more great lines than any other play, I think it does, more than Hamlet, I think, is Gloucester's, when Gloucester says, "As flies to wanton boys are we to the gods, they kill us for their sport." Wow! I'll go over that. As flies to wanton boys, wanton, mischievous boys. This is boys playing with flies. Catching them, letting them go, killing them, snatching them out of the air, hitting them with their shoe. As flies are to wanton boys, we are to the gods. So we're the flies, the gods are the mischievous boys. They kill us for their sport. Okay, great line, and rightfully so. And yet, in the mouth of Gloucester, I don't think Gloucester believes it. Edgar certainly does not believe it. Shakespeare certainly does not believe it. It's a little too dramatic. But wow. If one becomes an atheist, which in my opinion I never said, but atheism is an absolutely absurd stance. It too is based on faith, of course. The atheist can't prove anything either. It's a nonsensical position to take, in my opinion. Agnostic one can and should be to some degree. But anyway, great lines just flowing. And then the most moving scene of all, in that plot, they come to the cliffs of Dover, the white cliffs of Dover, and we can hear the water hitting the shore down below cliff, I don't know, 40 meters, let's say, 50 meters high. And Gloucester announces that he wants this servant to take him to the edge so that he can jump and kill himself. Now, he doesn't say that. "Please just take me to the edge and then leave me." "Okay," says Edgar, having, of course, no intention of doing so. Edgar gives a famous speech about, "Yes, I can see down below there, people look like ants. Way down, I see a boat, a fisherman, blah, blah, blah. Now leave me." "Okay." And Gloucester gives a moving, short speech about praying to the gods, by the way. Always the gods. I mentioned this religion thing. I'm not going to cover it very well, but always the gods. Now, I have 5 minutes, so I must finish this play. Where are we going? The two sisters, Regan and Goneril, both love Edmund. Edmund will... Now we meet Albany, too. Albany is Goneril's husband. And Albany was a little bit tepid and a little bit foolish at the beginning, but warms quickly because he, too, is loyal to Lear. And he sees the villainy of Edmund, the villainy of his own wife and his sister-in-law, Regan, the villainy of their treatment of Lear, who, though a fool, did not deserve everything that happened. But let's remember, when Lear went out into the storm, nobody pushed him out. Nobody pushed him out. To have stopped him would have required force. Do you put force on a King Lear? That's a hard one. Lear's follies, he courted. And in my opinion, we must bear that in mind. Now, I'm not saying, therefore, we should not feel compassion for the man or a measure of admiration. It's such a poignant, moving, heartbreaking tragedy. But he is the most foolish of all the heroes. And he insists on his folly. And he has a personality and a bearing that make it so no one can oppose him very easily. Okay, what's happening? Gradually, Lear is going to be brought to Dover also. Cordelia is there. And now comes, oh, God. Ooh, I can't do it. This is stupid. Okay, here we go. The reunion, mainly, most especially, the reunion between Lear and Cordelia, and then the ending. Oh my God. Okay. You can imagine how that reunion... This is stupid. Come on. You can imagine how that reunion is. Lear, in and out of madness, fully mad sometimes. We see him fully mad, and it's painful. It's painful. It's painful to anyone who sees it. Okay. But then a doctor treats him, gives him some rest, music, the old treatment, and he comes out of it at a certain point. Cordelia is there. I better cut this short. He begs for forgiveness. I gotta get a grip here. Okay. He begs for forgiveness. She forgives. That scene and the final scene are the most moving in literature. Nothing comes close. Nothing comes close. I've read it 50 times. Well, maybe not 50, but 25 times. I collapse every time. Even now, telling the story. God. Okay. Now, meanwhile, other things that happen. Edmund is arrested almost by Albany, is revealed because they read letters exchanged between Edmund and Goneril, and Edmund and Regan too. Quickly, Regan poisons Goneril, but then Regan commits suicide. For the love of Edmund, the rivalry between the sisters is the most interesting thing there, but it's minor, really, in the play. But both of them are so determined that the other will not have that fine young man, that handsome hunk, Edmund. Albany labels Edmund a traitor. Edmund will defend himself, but we need a champion. Out of nowhere comes Edgar with his visor down. Edgar, the brother, will defend Albany's claim that Edmund is a traitor. And by the rules then, God will determine who wins. The winner was right. Edgar kills Edmund. When Edmund is dying, he says he feels some goodness. He wants to do something good. And he says, quick, I've sent a captain with instructions to kill Lear, or kill Cordelia. To kill Cordelia. Quick, run fast, maybe you can stop him. Enter Lear for the final moment. So stupid. Okay, Lear carrying Cordelia's dead body. Oh my God. The captain did kill Cordelia. Lear killed the captain. Okay, I can't do this, so just Lear dies. Of what? I guess of exhaustion, let's say, and I guess madness, a broken heart. The lines surrounding his death are so moving, it's just overwhelming. Okay, is that all? Is that everything? Okay, the fool has disappeared mysteriously. He's moving too, but is he dead? We don't know, because Lear says mysteriously, and my poor fool is dead too. But he's carrying Cordelia at that time, and not two, I'm sorry. And is the fool Cordelia? or is the fool the fool? We don't know. They have kind of merged into one figure, the fool, so talkative and outspoken, and Cordelia so silent. Both of them kind of Christ-like. So at the end of the play we have Edgar and Albany and Kent. None of them wants to rule the king. None of them wants to rule the kingdom. The kingdom is in chaos. But there's the end of the play. Sorry. The end.